Thank you. We turn to item 11, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, a court decision that has changed the face of campaign funding and is the subject of a broad effort in the nation to modify a Supreme Court ruling, to regain control at the congressional level, at the state level, and at the local level, control over the regulation of campaign contributions for those jurisdictions that choose to consider that. And Julie Gutierrez is here to make the introduction and presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just a little bit of a background on this. In 2010, the Supreme Court heard the case of Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. And as a result of that case that was brought forward by Citizens United, which is a nonprofit group, they eliminated all spending limits by corporations for political ads without having to identify the donor list. This was brought to us by a community group here in Pasadena called Occupy Democracy Pasadena, and it was discussed at our Legislative Policy Committee back in July. One of the things they asked is if we would consider looking at a resolution which would support us revising the Supreme Court ruling. I would like to note that Congressman Adam Schiff also has a bill similar to this, HR Resolution 31, also again on the Citizens United. So at this time, what I've put together is a resolution that is attached in this report, simply saying that we should revise the Supreme Court ruling and enable the people through their elected representatives to regulate campaign contributions, and also to ensure that corporations are not afforded the same rights as people. So with this, kind of just a brief background that we received at the Ledge Policy, I will open to any questions, or I think we may have members here from the community.
We have cards of persons from the community who would like to address the subject. Shall we hear from them and then come to deliberations? The first name is John Smith from La Mirada. Second is Vincent DeStefano from, I think, Sierra Madre.
Good evening, Mayor Bogard, members of the council. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration on this important resolution. I'm John Smith, and I work with Common Cause. Common Cause is a national organization working on behalf of the American voter, and our mission is to encourage transparency and holding power accountable, and making sure that the people have full access to the information that they need to make an informed decision at election time. Across the country, over 500 cities have passed resolutions in support of amending the Constitution due to the Citizens United decision. 16 states have also passed resolutions, and just here in California, about 50 cities have passed resolutions in support of an amendment. The actual effort is not to overturn a Supreme Court decision, because only the Supreme Court can do that. The actual effort is to clarify the Constitution, because what the court did was to interpret the Constitution, to answer a question that was very difficult for them. They had in front of them the words corporation and labor unions and campaign finance, none of which is in the Constitution. And so they had to interpret the Constitution to answer the question before them. They did that by a 5-4 decision, which was very controversial, remains controversial today. What we would like to do with an amendment is to put the words into the Constitution that says that the people, through their representatives in government, can regulate elections, election expenditures, and campaign contributions. And that nothing in this amendment will set any limits on contributions or expenditures. That duty would then fall to the Congress at the federal level, the state legislature here in California and other states, and then at the local level, the city of Pasadena, the Board of Supervisors, or whatever the jurisdiction may be. So what we're hoping is that the council will take the lead in this area of California. Other cities look to Pasadena. It's a leadership city. And what we're hoping is that you'll pass this resolution and help us build the wave across the country that will lead to an amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We turn to Mr. DeStefano and then to Damaris Martinez.
Vincent is not here.
Damaris Martinez from Pasadena.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you. I have been eligible to vote for 22 years, and most years I've bumped into cynicism about voting and money used in political campaigns. The belief is that we can do nothing about this. And I'm here today because I'm tired of this passive cynicism. I don't see this as merely a now issue, but as a pay it forward issue, so that we create a fence and protection for people coming in the future. My ability to vote is a gift to me, hard-earned by women and men some time ago. I think we need to consider others in the same way and strike at apathy by creating a greater sense of equality and fairness, which are shattered by the ability of a person to usurp or overthrow an election that matters to the local citizenry. Hopelessness in citizenry is not good for a society. Hopeless citizens, if they are parents, typically pass this attitude down to their children and/or take it into the workplace, suggesting this attitude or worldview to other local citizens. The ability to come in and manipulate an election is infringement on the voting liberties and rights of the people who are to be served by the election. We enjoy many individual freedoms in this country that we owe to many people who worked hard to gift us with them. But I have noticed in my 40 years that our freedoms seem to be curtailed, so that there are big circles around each of us. We have a lot of latitude and space to be, act, and express, but there is a line. I envision it as a circle drawn around our personal freedoms when it comes to how they affect other individuals' freedoms. So when a person, through exercise of choice and liberty, amasses wealth beyond what they need or want to meet their basic needs and care for the ones they love, and they decide to spend it on an electorate that does not directly serve them, it unbalances the system for the local citizenry. Please, let's take a protective action for ourselves and for those good people coming shortly after us. They will thank us, just like I think of the women and men who cared enough to sacrifice their time to get involved in issues from their local places of existence. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Briggs.
First, I'd like to thank you, the mayor, and the city council for making the time tonight for this agenda item. We've been working long and hard at this. I'd also like to thank the city council members and their staff for having made the time to meet with us individually on this issue. It's been an educational experience for all of us. And I'd also like to thank the city manager's staff and the city manager, as well as the city clerk, for helping facilitate the dissemination of information to the city council so that they can make an informed decision tonight on this issue. And one last thing, I'd like to thank the patient people who came in support of this resolution. If they could they briefly stand for a moment? I could just like to thank them for being here. Thank you. We are a group of, I'll just give a brief summary so it's on the public record, and then I'll be done very quickly. We are a group of Pasadena citizens requesting that our city council adopt a resolution expressing support for a constitutional amendment to overturn the United States Supreme Court decision in the case of Citizens United v. the Federal Election Commission. This decision invalidated a century of local, state, and federal legislation that had restricted corporate and union spending in political campaigns. The 2010 court decision has unleashed a flood of unlimited and often anonymous campaign spending. We are alarmed because the problem of unlimited campaign spending has not been confined to federal races. Over $3.5 million was spent by independent expenditure committees in 2012 in the San Diego mayoral election. Over $10.5 million was spent by independent committees in the LA mayoral election earlier this year. There's no reason to believe that Pasadena elections will be immune from this. A grassroots coalition of organizations has come together to campaign for a constitutional amendment that will reverse the Citizens United decision. The coalition includes Common Cause among many other local and national organizations. And I can say there are faith communities that are also present in this room. And as recently as January 22nd, 2012, the church that I go to, the rector, Ed Bacon, gave a sermon on this very subject calling for a constitutional amendment for this very same thing. A growing number of cities here in Southern California have adopted resolutions condemning Citizens United's decision, including Chula Vista, Claremont, Lemon Grove, Los Angeles, Redlands, and San Diego. Statewide, over 50 cities and 5 counties have adopted these resolutions, and nationwide, over 500 municipalities have done so. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors has adopted a resolution as recently as June of 2012. We are respectfully requesting that you endorse and vote yes on a City Council resolution. Supporters of this effort have national polling election results from jurisdictions where the issue was referred to the ballot and anecdotal evidence demonstrating broad bipartisan support. We want Pasadena to help lead the way. And if I could just briefly add, this is about creating a sense of, to Damaris's points, it's about creating a sense of civic engagement. When you have a citizenry that feels like their vote matters, they become more involved, and they get involved in processes like these. They meet with their council members and the staff, and it makes for a healthier community where everybody's voice is heard. And I thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. That completes the public comment on this matter. I know from conversation with various persons that some people feel this resolution is right at the boundary of what is a municipal affair on which City Council should devote its time. The testimony tonight indicated that as many as 50 cities in California have taken action along these lines. I view this as an effort to reestablish local control over an area that I think the council should have discretion to deal with depending on its wishes and its concerns going forward. So let's see where we are on this. Mr. Kennedy wants to speak, and then Mr. Tornig.
First of all, I would like to, for discussion purposes, I'd like to move the recommendation with some minor modifications to the resolution that's reflected on 165. It says that the City of Pasadena urges the Congress. I would ask that we change the language to the City of Pasadena urges the United States Congress. And then as it relates to a constitutional amendment to reverse Citizens United's ruling and enable the people through their elected representatives, I think after Congress, it should say, and the state legislature or the California state legislature, and eliminate in the same paragraph state legislature. So it would ultimately read, now therefore be it resolved that the City of Pasadena urges the United States Congress and the California state legislature to propose and support to ratify a constitutional amendment to reverse the Citizens United ruling, etc.
Thank you, John. Mr. Tornig?
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor put it politely, the question for me is, whether or not this is at the limits. I think it was your phrase of
Close to the boundary.
close to the boundary. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to abstain on this matter. I'm one who did describe concern here. I'm going to continue to resist devoting council and staff time to national and international issues that may have great merit, because on matters that are beyond our control and beyond what I think we've campaigned on and been elected to the council to focus on. I think we should continue to focus our attention on the matters that we have some control over, that are appropriately before us. And I think, for example, that election reform is certainly an issue that is meritorious, and I would love to have this number of people focus on the fact that we have no spending limits in our local election ordinances. In fact, Citizens United, I don't think, has any impact on our elections. I think we should be considering term limits. I mean, I think there are a whole variety of issues that relate truly to what this council is empowered to do and should be focused on. So while I am grateful for the interest and for the people's willingness to show up tonight and express their interest, and while I, on a personal level, am supportive of efforts to overturn Citizens United, whether by constitutional amendment or, I guess that is the only means, I'm going to abstain on this effort because I think this is not what we should be devoting council and staff time to.
Thank you. Mr. Masuda?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not too sure, Mayor, this is close to the boundaries, but I did study this event, this ruling, and I know it was a very close ruling, 5-4. And the Supreme Court was talking about free speech, and that was their reason. And I know Kennedy was the deciding vote. I don't disagree or agree with the ruling, but I don't think it's part of Pasadena's business, so I'm going to abstain from our vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm prepared to support the staff recommendation. We did have this discussion, in fact, very robust discussion from what I remember at the Legislative Policy Committee. I do think that although we can't necessarily predict the outcome, because as a body we're not responsible for implementing whatever changes come about, we do have a role to play in terms of influence on the decisions of our federal policymakers. And so in that respect, I do think we have a role to play. Speaking to Mr. Tornick's comments, I do think, at some point, certainly not tonight, perhaps there's a discussion to be had about our own campaign finance and elections policy here in the city. I would just ask the city clerk, could you please restate Mr. Kennedy's amendments that he proposed, specifically with regard to the last paragraph, the now therefore it be resolved, that sentence that he amended?
I'll give it a try, and if I get it wrong, Councilmember Kennedy can correct me. That the City of Pasadena urges the U.S. Congress and the California State Legislature to propose and support and to ratify, I don't know if that's in there, a constitutional amendment to reverse the Citizens United ruling, and the rest of the paragraph stays the same. So there was the addition of, and the California State Legislature. Yeah, and I put that in there.
I guess my concern is, Julie, what is the role of our state legislature if this is an act of Congress, or what we're asking for an act of Congress to propose changes to?
We could always send it to them to let them know our position, in case this becomes an issue that's debated up in Sacramento. So they have it on authority of where Pasadena stands.
Mr. Madison.
Thank you.
I think actually another answer to Jackie's question is that there are only two ways to amend the Constitution. Either Congress, by a supermajority, opts to do that, or there's another procedure whereby two-thirds of the state's legislatures call for a national constitutional convention. And I think that method has not been very efficacious in the past. So I think the tack here is the former method, to ask Congress to amend pursuant to a two-thirds supermajority of each House. Tonight is an interesting night to discuss a proposal about getting two-thirds of Congress to agree when they can't agree, even to keep the lights on. I'm going to support the motion. I think we have to pause, though, and note the observation that was already made, which is that we don't, for this body, have rules prohibiting corporations from participating in our campaigns. The state of California doesn't have that. This was uniquely a federal creature, a Federal Elections Commission rule that corporations could not contribute to political campaigns as such, except through the formation of PACs, which is a little bit complicated and dilutes the power to do that. And where I come out is, number one, it is appropriate for us to address it because it is the First Amendment rights of our residents that are at issue here. And I think the fact that we have a different system in the state and the city can be explained by just the sheer volume of the special interests and the costs of campaigns. And I think there's a much greater risk of an insidious harm in national elections where corporations or other powerful groups that are not natural persons under the Constitution, who don't really have the right per se to freedom of political speech, can thumb the scale of those campaigns by putting literally tens or hundreds of millions of dollars into play. I mean, the case that we're talking about was a case where some conservative group had funded a movie that they were going to show on TV or something like that. I mean, it was a very powerful tool that, again, if one of us stands up and voices our opinion, it's clear who we are and that we have those political rights under the Constitution. But when some entity does that, it's not at all clear who it is. And there's, in my view, there's the risk of real undermining of our whole political process. So I'm going to support the motion, but I get all the points that are made. To Terry's comments, I have called a couple of times on the council during my tenure for a look at our campaign finance, if you will. We convened a task force at one point to look at that also, and the consensus always seems to be we kind of like the way we're doing things. So I'll leave it to others to judge whether that still is the case or not. So thanks, Mayor.
Is there a second for the motion that was first offered? Second received. Further comments before a vote might be taken? Oh, Ms. McCaustin.
Thank you. I also support the motion. I think you might recall I have been reluctant in the past to sort of step outside the municipal arena when it came to some other initiatives we were looking at supporting or opposing. But in this case, I agree. I think this is something that filters right down to us, and especially we ought to be, we're attuned to it because we are elected and we understand how influential money can be even in our own local elections. So I think it's important in this case that we take a stand and, let it be known that this is something we don't support. And campaign finance reform or whatever in Pasadena, I think it's great. I think the influence, I think we have seen, even in our own local elections, the influence of money grow considerably over the last couple of election cycles, where we used to see more neighborhood, locally funded elections. We're now seeing more outside money come in. And so I do support it. But I would say to Jean, we don't have a vote on this, correct? The Supreme Court, had the vote on this, or constitutional amendment. But we don't have a vote on the 710 either. And we've taken positions against that, and we have recognized the importance of taking a position even though we're not the final decision maker. So sometimes I think it matters.
If that completes the council's deliberations, is there an objection to the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Are there abstentions?
Mayor, I'd like to abstain for the reasons I indicated earlier.
Mr. Masuda abstains.
We have 6 in favor and 2 abstentions. The motion passes.
Thank you for all your hard work on this issue, which I know is very well intentioned for the benefit of our democratic system.
I'd also say, Mayor, that anyone that would sit through tonight's meeting especially obviously believes in the First Amendment very strongly.
We turn now to